Alright, you guys, this episode of War Stories. Anyway, I've told some of you bits and pieces of this story, but I never gave you guys the full story. Right now, I'm going to give you guys the complete story of everything that happened. So, I'm going to take you guys to 2003. This is when I discharged off of parole. I paroled from Corcoran. And let me kind of explain a little bit of what was going on at this time. So, prior to this, I had been functioning in Salinas. I got paroled out to Monterey County, and this is when I was working in dual capacity with Smokey from Salinas. Together, we were running the regiment out there in Salinas. However, we'd end up both catching violations. He'd go back on a new case. Unfortunately, Smokey would catch a live case. But this was from 2003. He just barely got out like 2 years ago. So he came from up under that live case. But he caught the live case. I ended up going back on a violation. And in 2003, March 4th of 2003, I walked out of Corcoran State Prison free. No parole. My second number, I gave him back another number, and I wasn't on parole. So I was basically free to do whatever the fuck I wanted to do. No high control parole, none of that. They had to let me go from right there in Corcoran, put me on a train, and that's what happened. So my intentions were to basically get the fuck out of Salinas. Smokey was gone. Operation Black Widow was heating up. The Cap Saloon incident was also heating up. A lot of the people that I had been out there with on the street were gone. So Salinas just didn't seem like there was a whole lot for me out there at that time. So my thing was to just get my shit and get the fuck up out of Dodge. That's what I did. So I had some guns out there that were hidden. I had some clothes and some other shit, that just some miscellaneous shit that I had. I had one of the homies holding it for me. So at this time, Vicky was still alive. She met me out there in Salinas that night. We stayed in a hotel the first night I got out, and then the next day we shot by the homeboy's pad, picked up all my shit, jumped up on the freeway, and got the fuck up out of Dodge. Now, my whole thing at this time was I just wanted to just fade on back and just kick back. Maybe try to take a reprieve from everything. Conejo got stripped. All my contacts or my channels were offline because they either got indicted, they were in trouble, or they locked it up. Big Rock had locked it up. We found out he was working with the feds. It was a trip. When we were celled up, you know, I didn't know who he was communicating with, but obviously he was working with the FBI while we were in Pelican Bay. And I paroled, but then I'd find out because he continued to stay in my channel, and I continued to stay in touch with him. I was sending him money, everything I was supposed to be doing. And then Mexican Mike ended up coming by. Big Roach ended up coming out to Ukiah for the purpose of giving me a whole bunch of kites from Conejo, and I was told to stop all communications with Big Rock. Apparently they found out he had been communicating with the feds, and the way they found it out was, I guess, he was doing it through the mail. At that time, Stork was over there. Corny had just got shipped out to Santa Rita to go back on the Operation Black Widow case. Anyway, the way that he ended up getting caught is, so he sent a letter out to whatever federal agent he was communicating with, and the letter ended up getting returned to sender. I don't know if it didn't have enough postage on it. I don't know what happened, but it got sent back to him. When it came back to the institution, so I guess what happened was there was another individual that just so happened to be a Imero that had the same name as Big Rock, David Ramirez. And apparently when the letter came back, it got delivered to the other guy by mistake. The Imero got the letter. I guess he read it, figured out what was going on, and then sent that letter to Stork. I would have loved to have been a proverbial fly on the wall to see how they communicated that back to Rock. I don't know if he was like placed on freeze, if they told him something. He was sealed up by himself, so there was nobody that could get to him. Anyway, that was one of. So let me back up to where I was at. So the next day, me and Vicky, we go to the homies pad. Like I said, we pick up my guns, we pick up all my shit, and then we get on the freeway and we go back to Ukiah. And like I said, I wanted to just take a reprieve for a while, let things cool down. Everybody was getting cracked, and I didn't have nobody to punch in with. All my channels were gone. So I'm out in Ukiah, and Big Roach ends up reaching out to me. He comes out there, he gives me all those kites, he tells me about Big Rock. I end up plugging back in with Corny in them. Eventually, I didn't want to just disappear. My heart was still in it, but I just wanted to just fade out for a little bit, man. There was too much shit going on. I didn't know who was who. I didn't know who was telling, who was cooperating. So I took a back seat for a minute. But, you know, because I still continued to stay in touch with other NF members that I was really close with, like Baki, Bubba, Wino, BJ. Because I reached out to them, they were like, where you at, bro? The brothers over here trying to get at you, man. They want you to plug in, tap in ASAP. So I had to go tap in. I had to get a visitor, go out to Santa Rita and send her in. So anyway, my directives at that time were, well, before I got those directives, my directives were basically just plug back in, and you know, they would get back at me on the next trip to let me know what they wanted me to do. And eventually, as you guys know, they'd end up sending me out to San Jose to relocate and to establish that regiment out there. So while I was still out in Ukiah, before me and Vicky packed up and lugged all our shit to Santa Clara County so I could end up getting fucking swooped up out there, I got a phone call from the Salinas regiment. And basically what happened is Mateo's got a big family out there. There's a lot of, you got a lot of brothers, a lot of sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, and at a couple of those houses out there, there's always a lot of traffic, and there's always a lot of NF members coming and going. Even hermanos, there's just they've always been deep in the mix. So Bubba, for those of you that know Bubba was another NF member. I've talked about him before in Inner Demons and in some of my other war stories. One of the sharpest C's that, you know, that I ran across besides Wino and Baki. You know, all them brothers are laced up, and they're all fairly well educated. Anyway, I got a phone call, and basically what happened was Bubba was at Mateo's sister's house, Nena, and he got shot at by some Southsiders. Apparently the Southsiders knew that spot, you know, was associated with Norteños, and they drove by the house and they caught Bubba out front and they took a couple shots at him. It's an inside joke, but from what I heard, Bubba, when these guys shot at him, he ran from like the sidewalk up the driveway, and he was doing the Matrix, like, you know, the Matrix slow motion when he's fucking dodging the bullets and shit. And anyway, that's what Bubba said. A couple other people said that's what Bubba did when he ran up into the house. So anyway, a couple of us got called, and you know, the whole reason why we were reached out to is because of the situation that happened with Bubba. So it was me, Baby Joker, and another individual who I'm not going to name. We all got called to go out to Salinas to basically put security on Nana's house and to go out there and deal with that conflict. So that's what we did. I went out there. At that time I had a 38 and I believe a 9mm. I took them out there with me. Baby Joker ended up showing up, and I think he had a 50 caliber Desert Eagle, nasty ass gun. Bubba had, I don't remember what exactly he had. Might have been a 357, something like that. And then the other homie had like I don't remember, a 9mm or something. I know he had some type of semi-automatic pistol. So I talked about this before in one of my past profiles, but so there's I'll mention it during this first incident. I gotta be careful with this one, and you guys understand why. So I'm not gonna give you guys specific locations, times, or nothing like that. But so there's a Sureño neighborhood out there, and it's kind of tucked off to the side. So there's one way in, and you got to kind of swing, and then you got to kind of drive in and drive around and come out. So we drove down there for the purpose of looking for somebody, anybody to engage with, and we were all packing. So had we seen somebody that day, the first day, it would have been all bad. There was also a house out there that was associated with two individuals that were both apparently Southsiders. Shout out to the Southsiders, you guys already know. So basically we hit these two locations. We hit them both and we couldn't find anybody. The pad, when we drove by the pad the first time, it was still around 5 o'clock. There was still a lot of light out, and we didn't want to do nothing in the daytime hours. So we just kind of drove by, identified the house. We all made a mental note of where it was at, and then we smashed off. And this is where I've told you guys about some of the events in some of my past profiles. So that day, after we hit those two locations, I'm driving, and at that time I had an Explorer, but I ended up, when I drove out there, the Explorer was new. So when I ran into Mateo's sister Nena, she wanted to drive the Explorer, so I jumped in her Bronco, and that's what we mashed out in, her Bronco. So we're mobbing in her Bronco, and over off a rider somewhere on the east side, over there by Casitas, we're driving, and there's a cat that's crossing the street. He's on the crosswalk, and he's walking. I'm an aggressive driver. I drive kind of fast. I always do a lot of rolling stops, and that's my habit of driving. So this dude's crossing the street, and I come smashing up. I kind of stop. I do a rolling stop, and I keep going. There's a car across the street that's ready to cross the street, and when I'm going through the cross, when I cross the street, they're crossing over, and I look over and I see that it's two fucking cops. I can tell they're cops as soon as I see them, and sure enough, man, they fucking throw on the lights, they turn around, and the chase is on. Well, actually, at first, I had a mental fucking a mental misstep, I'll call it. I started to pull over when they lit us up. And when I did that, I remember it was either BJ or Bubba was like, bro, what are you doing? We got fucking guns in the car. We're all on parole. Go. So I mashed off, man. I'm in a Bronco, and I'm in a residential neighborhood. I pushed that Bronco as fast as it could go, and I swear to God, it was probably like, it seemed like it was over 100. It's like I'm driving through the residential neighborhoods, blowing through stop signs, like, man. I'm not, this is not my ego again, man, but I've been in high speeds before, and I've gotten away. I'm a pretty damn good driver. That's just, like I said, I'm an aggressive driver. I drive fast, But you know, some of the maneuvers I was doing on these guys, man, it got to a point, I think, where they were like, hey, fuck that. This dude's going to kill somebody, abandon pursuit. That's what they did. They fell back. I seen them. And we smashed all the way back to Nana's pad. As soon as we got there, we all jumped out. The Bronco had a top that came off. So the first thing we did is we jumped out. We got out. We fucking opened up the top of the Bronco, took it off, carried it in the backyard, went in the house. Nothing happened the rest of the day. Baby Joker kicked it for a little. One other thing did happen. So Baby Joker kicked it for a couple more hours. The other homie that came from, I'm not going to say where he came down from the valley, from the opposite way. From, you know, he came from the valley. So me, Bubba, and Joker, and the other homie were kicking it. And Nana had a pool table downstairs in her house. And so we're playing pool and shit. And there was a point where we're drinking beer and we're talking. But I'm still keeping security on this house. I got 2 guns in my hand. I got them both in my hands. Like, I'm running to the front of the house, looking out the windows, running to the back, just making sure. I'm thinking these fools are going to come back at any time. They just shot at Bubba, and it's on right now. So I always kept those guns within hands reach. If I didn't have them in my hands, they were close by, so I could be on the ready. Anyway, I think I was doing too much, because I told you guys before that I think it was the 38. So I'm talking to Baby Joker and Bubba when all of a sudden I'm talking to Joker and I'm like this, man, and fucking the 38. Luckily it was pointing down. It went off, and when it went off, BJ jumped up in the air. This fool jumped up like a fucking flying monkey, man. He jumped so high that it was fucking hysterical, man. It was almost like he jumped so high he was gonna bounce off the ceiling. But he jumped up, and like I said, it was lucky that I had the gun facing down. I actually shot a hole in the couch. And because when he jumped up, he was like, damn, bro. You know, he was like, you almost shot me, eh? Right? He was like, bro, put the gun down, homeboy. Put the gun down, right? So, you know, that was the only other incident that happened that night. Eventually, BJ had to bounce, so he cut up out of there. He was gone. He had nothing else to do with anything else that happened. Bubba, he stayed at the pad. Me and the homie got in later on the next day, the following day. Me and the other homie that came from the valley. And again, like I said, Bubba didn't have nothing to do with this. Bubba stayed home. He stayed at Nana's. He did not come with us. So this other homie, solid dude. Fucking solid homeboy, man. That's all I'll say about him. Good ass, solid dude. I got nothing but the utmost of love and respect for him. Straight soldier. So, me and him ended up taking another car, somebody else's car. I don't know, I don't remember. It was a car, if it was an SUV, whatever it was. So, we drove, we left the house at around, it's probably around 8 o'clock. It was dark. And originally we left because they wanted fucking, so, let me just say this. So, we were supposed to be making a Taco Bell run. Initially that's what we were leaving for. But me and the homie, we had been talking earlier, and we were like, man, tonight let's hit that pad and let's go hit that hood, right? So the guns that we took with us weren't the guns that I told you guys about earlier. I'm not going to talk about what kind of guns they were for obvious reasons. I'm not trying to get caught up. You know, it's not like I sat around and waited to see what happened. If anybody got hit or if anybody, we didn't stick around, man. So I'm just playing it safe. More than likely, nobody did. So obviously the first thing, we didn't go straight to Taco Bell. We didn't even make it to Taco Bell. So The first thing we did is we go over to that pad, the pad that we went to earlier in the day. And when we got there, this is an area that's not, it's not a high traffic area. It's a quiet neighborhood. It's like, man, if you shoot guns over there, the whole fucking neighborhood's gonna come out. You're gonna hear it. It's gonna be loud. And if you're gonna do something like that, it's gotta be done fast, and you gotta get the fuck up out of there quick. So when we get to the area where the house is, I park the car on the corner, and we sit there for a little bit, and we watch the house. And nobody comes in, nobody comes out. The lights were on. We knew people were in there, but there was no movement out front. And a lot of times these dudes supposedly would kick it in the garage. From what I had been told earlier that day, they would kick it in the garage with the garage door open, and they kept guns in the garage because they knew that their house was a target. So anyway, we had been sitting in front of the house for about 15 minutes. And like I said, nobody was coming in, nobody's coming out. There wasn't no other movement out in that neighborhood. So at some point, the homie was like, hey, bro, he was like, let's just go spray that motherfucker up, man. So I take the safety off my shit. Homeboy takes the safety off his. You know what I mean? I check my clip. He checks his. I start the car up, and lo and behold, the whole time we had been sitting there, nobody came out of the house. Nobody went in. But as soon as I started the car, somebody came out pushing their garbage. They were pushing it out to the street. When I seen that, I didn't want to just hit the fucking accelerator and smash up on them like we were the fucking cops. These dudes knew that they were targets, so I wanted to try to creep up on them. But by the time I got halfway down the block, this dude had already put his garbage in the street and was already heading back to the house. But what the homie did was he rolled down his window, slipped out the window so that he could sit on the door of the passenger door and lean over the top of the car with his gun, and that's what he did. When I got in front of the house, and I want to say that the dude that came out wasn't in the house yet. He was like right there towards the front door when homeboy started spraying up the house. And I'm talking about he was spraying that motherfucker up. Now, I'm gonna say this. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a house that has been shot up, but it's an experience that you'll never forget, especially when somebody shoots your house up with especially when trying to think of a way to say this, man. Especially when somebody shoots your house up with big caliber guns. They'll go through the walls and hit the house like it's a tin can. I swear to God, I've been in a house before that got sprayed up like that, and the bullets will literally just go through the walls like fucking butter. If nobody got hit in that house, I swear to God, they're probably the luckiest people in the world, man. Because, you know, aside from homeboys spraying the house up, when I got in front of the house, my window, I'd already rolled my window down. And as soon as I got in front of it, I started spraying the house up. We're both spraying it up at the same time. I got off, I emptied up my whole clip, homeboy emptied his, and then we got up out of there. So we split. At first we were gonna go back to the house, but like I said, this motherfucking homie, man, I got nothing but love and respect for this dude. Solid ass homeboy, type of homie that you'd want with you. But I was on the same page. I was a nut just like the homie. We were like-minded individuals, man. You know, we're mashing back towards Nana's. Homie's like, bro, let's go hit that fucking, let's go hit the hood too. Let's go hit that neighborhood. So I'm like, man, it's where the house was, the neighborhood was probably like a half a mile away, man. So it's kind of on the way towards Nana's anyway. So anyway, we drive into this. Some of you probably know what neighborhood I'm talking about, and that's cool. You know what I mean? But I'm gonna keep most of you guessing. Anyway, when we drive into this neighborhood, you drive in and you got to make a left, and it kind of winds around. Well, I pulled in, and then I pulled right into this parking stall because we wanted to get out. When we first drove in, there was nobody out there. There wasn't nobody out there that looked like they fit that image that we were looking for. We were looking for ops. Shout out to my South Side boys. You guys already know, man. Anyway, we get out the car and we're both carrying these guns, and these are some big guns, man. So I had the gun on the side of my leg so that I could kind of conceal it as best I could, but there's only so much you can do with a gun like that, man. Anyway, put a fresh clip in before we jumped out. We get over there and we see a couple people, but they look like they're nobodies. We see a couple females that are walking by. They look like mothers or grandmothers. And then when we got to like the third building over, all the way at the end on the right side, there were a group of individuals, probably like 5 or 6 of them. And as soon as we seen them, we knew that's what we were looking for, man. They just had that look. Dallas Cowboy jerseys, blue shirts, straight up. In that area, they're pretty thick over there too, man. It's a known area. So anyway, as soon as we see him, me and the homie both, we just start busting on them cats. Right where we were, right at the corner of the building on the opposite end. We just start busting on them. So we start busting on these cats, and they all scattered. Some of them ran around the corner. They all just dispersed, man. But I seen at least 2 or 3 of them run into one of the doorways into one of the buildings. So when I seen that, I started to run down there. I was gonna try. I thought those cats were like in the fucking on the stairs, and that I could catch them sitting right there on the stairs, or that they were just held up right there. But as soon as I started running down towards that door, the homeboy grabbed me by the arm, and he was like, "Nah, bro, let's go. The cops are gonna be coming." And not even 5 seconds after he grabbed me, the gate flew open like somebody had kicked it, and these fools came out and they started firing back. So somebody lived right there, and they had guns on the ready, man. They had them right there ready, because it wasn't even 5 seconds before they went up in there, before they came back out and started shooting back. So now we're getting shot at. But they don't got high power. I could tell by their guns that they weren't high power guns. But it was time to get the fuck up out of there anyway. So when they started shooting, we'd already backed up on the corner where we were at. We'd already swung back around that corner, and we're headed towards the car, man. We jumped in the car. I threw my shit in the back seat. Homeboy jumped in, started up, and we took off. Fuck Taco Bell. Nobody ate Taco Bell that night. We ended up going back to the pad. We knew we had to get the fuck off the street, that somebody might have seen us, and that somebody was gonna report that to the cops. So we didn't want to take a chance driving around out there, man. We smashed back to Nana's, and that was pretty much it, man. Within those 2 or 3 days, I had been in a couple drive-bys. I had been in a high-speed chase, and at that time, man, I'm not gonna lie, me and Vicky, we were kind of fighting. So we, I had left the house for a couple of days, and she was mad that I went out to Salinas. But I had to explain to her I have obligations, and there's things that I still have to do when I'm called upon. So, but coincidentally, the next day, it had been like 3 days since I talked to her. She called me up and she was like, "Man, you need to come back home." And I was like, "Man, I know, I do, And I told her, I was like, "Man, since I've been gone, uh, it's been a crazy run for the last 3 days. I've been in a fucking in a high speed. I've been in a couple drive-bys. I need to get the fuck out of Salinas. I just need you to come pick me up." So, no, matter of fact, she didn't come pick me up. I just told her that I needed to get out of Salinas and that I was coming home. So, basically, that's what I did, man. I jumped on the freeway and I was back at the pad that night. Even driving back after everything we had done those last 2 days, I was leery about even getting on the freeway with the guns still in the car. Because initially I took my 2 guns out there with me, 38 and a 9mm. And, that was the whole purpose I went out there for, is to keep security on Bubba. But, driving them back, I was spooked, man. Like I said, man, I didn't stick around. Nobody stuck around to see what kind of aftermath we might have left. Anyway, when you're in situations like that and you're out there and you get involved in situations where there's gunplay like that, you get paranoid, man. I didn't want to drive back with those guns in the car. I was happy that we got away. The homie bounced later on that night. He went back to the valley, and I crashed out that night. And the next morning early, I went back to Ukiah. I felt like I dodged a huge bullet, no pun intended, literally. And it is what it is. But that's another short one. This is episode 9, I believe, of War Stories. I'm going to get another one out to you guys tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate all those of you that are supporting the channel, and I'm out.